This young man, named Joan, is a student in the preparatory class of the Celestial Pivot City Battle Armor Academy. He has no idea why, while simply sitting in the vehicle, he was suddenly flung out. What's even stranger is the eerie sense of déjà vu. This scene feels like something he has experienced countless times before, as if trapped in an endless loop of fate. The incident began a few moments ago. When Joan regained consciousness, he found himself inside a refugee transport vehicle. The cramped cabin was filled with weary, ragged refugees whose eyes were void of hope, their spirits seemingly crushed by the trials of survival. Escorting the vehicle was a 5-member tactical squad. Their mission was perilous, guarding the convoy with 2 armed pickups equipped with heavy machine guns. The soldiers looked tense and vigilant, their expressions revealing the constant readiness to face danger head-on. Shortly after the convoy departed from their last supply point, the beast detection radar on one of the escort vehicles began emitting a piercing alarm, shattering the fragile peace. The driver of the lead vehicle immediately radioed the captain, detecting a high-speed, unidentified object ahead, but there's nothing visible on the horizon. This unexpected anomaly intensified the tension. The captain, a seasoned veteran, quickly grasped the gravity of the situation. Without hesitation, he ordered all combat personnel to prepare for engagement, the sound of weapons being readied echoing through the convoy. Just as the command was issued, a deafening tremor shook the ground. The earth itself seemed to shudder, a harbinger of something monstrous. Suddenly, a sandworm beast burst out from beneath the ground. Its massive body, towering like a mountain, effortlessly flipped over the second escort vehicle, sending shards of metal scattering through the air. The violent shockwave rattled the transport vehicle, which swayed precariously. Many passengers who hadn't secured their seat belts were flung out, their screams piercing the chaos. The captain immediately commanded the gunner on the first vehicle to open fire. Flames erupted from the machine gun as he retrieved a specially designed spear from his back, preparing to engage the beast in close combat. Meanwhile, he instructed the 2 crew members of the second vehicle to escort the transport out of the combat zone as swiftly as possible, while the first vehicle stayed behind to distract the sandworm and buy him an opening to attack. The heavy machine gun on the lead vehicle roared to life, unleashing a torrent of bullets that momentarily stunned the massive beast, sparks flying with every impact. Inside the transport vehicle, amidst the cacophony of gunfire, Joan found himself trapped. He knelt down to comfort a terrified little girl who had fallen, trying to calm her trembling sobs. Despite his overwhelming confusion about his whereabouts, the chaos left him no time to think. The driver soon shouted at the top of his lungs, "Buckle up, everyone! The road ahead is about to get extremely dangerous." His voice betrayed a barely restrained panic. Hearing these words, Joan froze. A deep, unshakable sense of familiarity swept over him. This exact scene had played out before, not just once, but countless times. And instinctively, he knew what was about to happen next. Meanwhile, the team members of the second vehicle seized the opportunity while the sandworm was distracted. They quickly uprighted the overturned vehicle, maintaining high alert as they escorted the refugee transport vehicle away from the battlefield at top speed, determined to distance themselves from the raging conflict. However, the relentless attacks had thoroughly enraged the sandworm. It let out a bone-chilling roar, opening its massive, tooth-filled maw as it lunged toward the convoy with the force of a moving mountain, exuding a terrifying presence. Sensing the critical moment, the captain launched a close-range assault without hesitation. The specially designed spear in his hand glinted coldly as he struck repeatedly, targeting the beast's vital points with precise and unrelenting blows, leaving it no room to recover. The captain's relentless assault, combined with the heavy machine gun fire from the first vehicle, created a seamless synergy. The once arrogant sandworm was quickly reduced to a battered state, its thick hide torn apart, with blood and fragments splattering everywhere. Though the sandworm's tough exoskeleton was like natural armor, even its hardened shell could not withstand the sustained bombardment from the heavy artillery. Cracks formed and spread, its defense crumbling under the relentless onslaught. Yet, just as the tactical team believed victory was within reach and let their guard down, the sandworm suddenly retaliated with a powerful surge of energy, flipping the first vehicle with ease. The sound of twisting metal echoed through the battlefield. The captain, seeing the dire situation, leaped fearlessly toward the sandworm. Armed with his spear, he engaged the monstrous beast in a desperate, life-or-death struggle, each strike delivered with all his strength. Finally, he seized the perfect opportunity and drove his spear through the sandworm's seemingly impenetrable shell, delivering a devastating blow to its core and inflicting severe damage. However, the beast's immense size and the resulting recoil from his attack sent the captain flying through the air, landing hard on the ground, leaving him temporarily disoriented. Fortunately, the severely injured sandworm chose to retreat underground rather than continue its assault on the fallen captain, granting the tactical team a much-needed reprieve. As the battle subsided, the tension in the air began to ease. The gunner from the first vehicle couldn't help but praise the captain's extraordinary combat skills. Smiling confidently, the captain replied with a hint of pride, "This mass-produced Vanguard battle armor is leagues above your standard exosuits." However, just as he was about to continue his boasting, his expression froze. A profound sense of unease crept over him, his instincts warning him that the danger was far from over. Without delay, he used his helmet communicator to inquire about the convoy's current position, his tone laced with urgency. Unfortunately, his worst fears were confirmed. The sandworm had proven to be far more intelligent than anticipated. It was silently and swiftly closing in on the transport vehicle ahead, its movements calculated and stealthy. What's worse, this time, the sandworm had set its sights directly on the refugee transport vehicle, ready to unleash a devastating assault on the helpless passengers. The escort team members were left stunned as they witnessed the sandworm's ferocious assault. Shocked to their core, they froze in place, unable to react. For a brief moment, the scene descended into chaos and paralysis. It was in this very moment of disorder and helplessness that the opening scene unfolded. The reason and chain of events that led to Joan being flung out of the vehicle became all too clear. However, Joan felt compelled to clarify one thing. He was no refugee. His true identity was that of a student in the preparatory class at the Celestial Pivot City Battle Academy, a far cry from the ordinary civilians around him. More importantly, if his memories were correct, that little girl would soon face an imminent and fatal danger, a tragedy he had already witnessed countless times in this seemingly endless loop. As the familiar scenes replayed in his mind, Joan had once considered giving up. He longed to escape this relentless cycle of fate. But watching the same tragedy unfold over and over, powerless to intervene, filled him with a suffocating sense of despair he could no longer endure. "No more," he shouted within himself. He refused to endure this torment again. A question burned in his mind. If he had a battle armor, could he have prevented these disasters? If he could forge a contract with a powerful battle armor, could it change his powerless existence and grant him the ability to rewrite his destiny? At that very moment, the two team members aboard the second vehicle bore witness to an awe-inspiring scene. Amidst a blinding white light, an invisible force swept across the battlefield, leaving them in utter disbelief. The sandworm, poised to launch a devastating attack on the transport vehicle, was struck by the light and met a catastrophic end. Its massive body, once so imposing, was torn apart like fragile paper, shattered into fragments within an instant. What made the moment even more surreal was that time itself seemed to halt. Everything around them froze in a bizarre stillness, as if the entire world had been suspended in awe of the dazzling light that illuminated the battlefield. After the instant, decisive kill, he descended steadily, piloting the contract battle armor named White Tiger. His presence was akin to a guardian angel descending from the heavens, exuding an aura of unmatched authority and strength. With his right hand, he reached out gently yet precisely, catching the little girl who was fated to perish, as if the entire world had paused in that moment to save her. Then, with a slight lift of his left hand, he effortlessly set down the transport vehicle, which weighed several tons, as if it were no heavier than a feather. The seamless motion left everyone around in awe, their breaths held in disbelief. As for the sandworm that had brought about this calamity, its massive body had been utterly obliterated. All that remained was a lifeless pile of mud, lying silently by the roadside, as if it had never been a threat. Once the transport vehicle was safely grounded, the little girl's mother darted out of the cabin like an arrow, clutching her child tightly in her arms as tears streamed down her face. Her emotions were a mix of relief at their survival and the overwhelming joy of reclaiming her child from the brink of death. The surrounding refugees gathered around, their voices rising in praise and gratitude, hailing him as a hero. Yet, amid the cheers, the mother's eyes still held a trace of deep worry. Her arms refused to loosen their grip, as though fearing any chance of danger striking again. Meanwhile, the two team members from the second vehicle stared at him in utter shock. Their wide-eyed expressions made it clear they couldn't tell whether the pilot of the White Tiger battle armor was friend or foe. Tense and cautious, they quickly pointed their weapons at him and shouted for his identity. Joan was about to confidently introduce himself when his attention was abruptly diverted by something, or rather, someone that had no reason to be there, a dog. The sight was bizarre, as he distinctly remembered there had been no dog on the transport vehicle earlier. Stranger still, the dog started speaking. It casually praised Joan for his impressive performance, its tone oddly relaxed, as if they were simply chatting over tea. Joan stood there, stunned and at a loss for words. Suddenly, a wave of dizziness washed over him, and the dog transformed before his eyes into a grotesque humanoid figure with a dog's head. Its bizarre appearance made him instinctively step back, his mind reeling. Summoning his courage, he tried to ask what this creature was, but a familiar alarm clock's ringing cut through the surreal moment. The piercing sound yanked him out of the strange dream, dragging him back into reality. Upon waking, he let out a deep sigh. He was certain this wasn't the first time he had experienced such a dream. The recurring familiarity left a lingering unease in his heart. For countless nights in the past, he had dreamt of that pristine white battle armor. Every intricate detail of its design was etched vividly in his memory. While the armor's appearance seemed to vary slightly in each dream, he was certain they were all the same suit. Its distinctive presence was unmistakable. However, whenever he tried to recall the armor's name, an excruciating headache would surge through his mind, forcing him to abandon the thought. As he changed into his work clothes and prepared to leave, the morning news playing on the television caught his attention. The broadcast was about the Jokin metal virus, a mysterious pathogen discovered by Dr. Belisarius Joe. Even after 3 centuries, the virus remained an enigma. What was even more alarming was the growing number of mutated creatures caused by the infection. Today's news also included a breaking story. Earlier that morning, a mutated creature attack occurred near Celestial Pivot City. Reports stated that a transport vehicle traveling from the small outpost of Manga to Celestial Pivot City was ambushed by a mutated creature, resulting in the death of the entire escort team. What made this incident particularly shocking was that the squad had been equipped with the latest FA-2 Vanguard battle armors, yet even they couldn't survive the attack. Joan inhaled sharply, his mind racing. He speculated that for a team outfitted with Vanguard battle armors to be wiped out, the mutated creature they faced must have been at least level 3 or higher. What kind of bad luck is that, he thought to himself. Despite the risks, Joan still yearned for a battle armor of his own. He knew that only by obtaining one could he have a chance to escape his dire situation and pay off the colossal debt weighing on his family. It was late at night when he finally wrapped up his part-time job. Honestly, if not for the upcoming placement test at the Combat Armour Academy, he wouldn't have had to work so hard in the dead of night. However, the boss at this place was absurdly stingy. After working tirelessly all evening, he only earned a measly 10,000 credits, not even a tenth of what was promised. The paltry pay left him frustrated and bitter. If a whole month's effort could only yield this much, the mountain of family debt would inevitably continue to weigh on his sister's shoulders. He couldn't help but envy the wealthy. With battle armors at their disposal, they could simply pick up guild tasks and effortlessly earn more in a day than he could in weeks of backbreaking work. On his way home, something caught his eye in a roadside gear shop. Displayed in the window was a batch of brand new E3 powered exoskeleton suits, their metallic sheen gleaming under the dim streetlights, radiating a sense of power and reliability. He marveled at how these exoskeletons had once been heavily restricted military-grade equipment during the early days of post-apocalyptic reconstruction. Back then, ordinary people couldn't even dream of owning one. But with the advent of the first generation of mass-produced battle armors, exoskeletons had gradually transitioned to civilian use. While their combat capabilities and defensive features couldn't compare to those of even the first-generation battle armors, they were more than sufficient for self-defense or labor-intensive tasks. The E3 model in the window, the final generation of this series, had now been fully adapted for civilian use. Yet its sleek design and impressive features made it hard not to admire. To him, owning one of these exoskeletons would be the equivalent of having a first-generation battle armor. If he ever got the chance, he'd love to have one, just to experience its strength and utility firsthand. After all, guild task rules didn't prohibit the use of exoskeletons. With one of these suits, taking on odd jobs, or venturing into the ruins outside the city to hunt monsters and gather mutant cores would be much easier. Now it all came down to whether the price of this so-called new armor could be within reach. Reality, however, mercilessly crushed his hopes. The price tag on the exoskeleton was a staggering 1 million credits. While this amount was trivial compared to the massive debt his family owed, the fact that a single exoskeleton could cost such an exorbitant sum felt like daylight robbery. Still, he begrudgingly admitted that in today's world, this price was considered reasonable. To maintain tight control over battle armors, the government imposed high prices to restrict the spread of exoskeletons, pushing civilians to opt for cheaper battle armor alternatives. However, acquiring battle armor legally came with only two options: enlist in the military or gain admission to a battle armor academy. Without legitimate qualifications, owning a battle armor was a serious crime, punishable by imprisonment or worse, a life sentence. After returning home, he wearily opened the information page for mass-produced battle armors. Displayed on the screen was the FA-2 Vanguard battle armor, the latest model developed by Tianshu Technology. The armor's standout feature was its fully automated dressing system, requiring no mechanical assistance, which greatly enhanced its ease of use. While it still required dedicated storage space, a minor drawback, its portability had seen significant improvements compared to the previous generation. What truly excited him was its civilian version's price, a mere 300,000 credits. At such a low cost, it felt like a giveaway. No wonder the Qin Defense Force had fully upgraded their standard armor to this model. However, his excitement was quickly overshadowed by worry. If the upcoming placement test at the Battle Armor Academy assigned him to the logistics division, he would lose the eligibility to purchase a battle armor, and his dreams would be dashed. Just as he was sinking deeper into his concerns, his older sister, Jonah, suddenly barged into his room without warning. Luckily, he was dressed, or the situation might have turned awkward. Remembering the last time he entered her room without knocking and got a flying kick for his troubles, he held back his frustration and reminded her, "Could you at least knock before coming in next time?" Jonah, however, was having none of it. With a sharp glare, she shot back, "What's your problem? Feeling bold enough to call me by my full name now?" As the captain of the Azure Dragon Battle Armor Squad in the Celestial Pivot City Border Defense Force, Jonah had earned her right to be commanding and fierce, thanks to her outstanding combat achievements. He couldn't help but feel she was being a bit of a hypocrite, but even he had to admit that her no-nonsense personality might explain why her love life had always been rocky. Hearing his sarcastic remark, Jonah didn't hesitate to grab a specially designed iron box and hurl it at him, adding a mocking comment. "Coming from a lifelong single guy like you? Give me a break." Despite their constant bickering, the siblings shared a mutual commitment to supporting their family. This time, Jonah had brought back a mutant crystal and handed it to him, firmly instructing him to sell it by the end of the week. "Use the proceeds to pay off this month's family debt first," she said. "Whatever's left is yours to spend, but don't waste it on anything pointless, got it?" Before leaving, Jonah emphasized repeatedly that he mustn't forget to repay the loan on time. Otherwise, the bank would repossess their house without hesitation. To her, this house was the last remaining piece of their family's memories, a precious connection to their parents and their past. Losing it was simply unthinkable. She placed a firm hand on his shoulder and said earnestly, "I believe in you, little brother. I know you'll keep this family together." Her heartfelt words filled him with warmth, but he couldn't resist retorting with a grin. "Sis, your flattery skills are getting sharper. Here's hoping they help you find a boyfriend soon." Jonah chuckled at his response. After finishing her serious reminders, she shifted back to her usual playful demeanor, joking around with him and lightening the mood. Yet, as she was about to leave, her tone turned serious again. "Passing the Battle Armor Academy test is just the first step. The road ahead will only get tougher. You'll need to push yourself harder to overcome the challenges waiting for you." He nodded in agreement, watching her silhouette disappear through the doorway. Still, his heart felt heavy. He understood better than anyone the enormous burden she carried behind her carefree facade. Picking up the advanced mutant crystal she had handed him, he examined it closely, emotions swirling in his chest. His sister had sacrificed so much for the family, shouldering responsibilities that words could never fully describe. Joan knew he couldn't let her down. Meanwhile, over at the Battle Armor Academy, a female student was quietly praying, hoping her results in the placement test could be at least 1/10 as good as Jonah's. Across from her, a male classmate scoffed. "Keep dreaming. Jonah is the most exceptional genius this academy has ever seen. Her talent is 1 in a million. There's no way anyone could catch up to her. Despite knowing this, the female student frowned in confusion and asked, but if Jonah's talent is so incredible, why did she turn down the high-paying military academy offer and choose to stay here in Celestial Pivot City? The male student paused, then ventured a guess. Probably to take care of her younger brother. I heard that when Jonah graduated, Joan had just returned to the academy after a break. And now, Joan is ranked right behind her on the Genius leaderboard. It's no surprise she's putting so much hope in his future. After hearing the male classmate's remarks, the female student couldn't help but chuckle, teasing him for actually believing in the so-called genius rankings privately compiled by students. However, when the topic shifted to geniuses, her expression turned serious as she mentioned a recent rumor about a civilian prodigy circulating within the academy. According to the rumor, this prodigy was currently ranked 3rd in his grade. However, because he came from a humble background, many were curious whether he would eventually gain access to a contract battle armor. The question had sparked widespread speculation among the students. The male classmate dismissed her perspective, insisting that talent was a gift from the heavens and had nothing to do with one's lineage. He believed that the ability to use contract battle armors depended solely on one's skills and opportunities, not their family background. The female student disagreed, pointing out that descendants of battle armor families had access to vast resources, making it far more likely for them to obtain advanced contract battle armors. She cited the examples of the academy's top students, Yao Lelin and Yu Sheng, both of whom came from prominent battle armor families. Refusing to back down, the male classmate countered by bringing up Jonah as an exception. He argued that Jonah's achievements were entirely built on her talent and hard work, proving that background wasn't the determining factor for success. The female student, however, remained unconvinced. She noted that while the surname Zhou was uncommon, there was once a Zhou family among the central 3 houses. She speculated that Jonah might be a distant relative from a lesser branch of that family. As their discussion grew increasingly heated, one of the students they mentioned, Yu Sheng, happened to enter the classroom. His sudden appearance caused both of them to momentarily freeze. Seeing Yu Sheng, the two couldn't help but feel nervous. Knowing his reputation for being difficult to deal with, they quickly shifted the conversation back to discussing Joan. The female student expressed concern over Joan's year-long break from school, wondering if it might impact his placement test performance. She worried that a drop in his ranking could cause him to miss out on critical opportunities. Unfortunately for them, their voices were so loud that even with headphones on, Yu Sheng overheard every word. He removed his headphones and cast a cold, piercing glance in their direction, sending a chill down their spines. Seemingly oblivious to Yu Sheng's gaze, the female student boldly admitted that she admired Joan. She remarked that if Joan managed to pass the placement test and join the contract preparatory ranks, his future would be incredibly bright. In fact, she speculated that Joan might even receive a gifted advanced contract battle armor from the academy upon graduation, making him one of the most ideal partners anyone could ask for. Hearing this, Yu Sheng finally couldn't hold back a cold laugh, his eyes filled with disdain. He began mocking, "Joan? His future? You think his future looks bright? Don't make me laugh." With a sneer, he continued, "Don't you know the Zhou family fell from grace long ago? When they were banished from the capital, Yuheng, their family was already in ruins, barely holding on. As for Joan, a pitiful pauper like him, there's no way he could be connected to any prominent battle armor family." Not stopping there, Yu Sheng's voice dripped with contempt as he added, "Everyone in the academy knows Joan is drowning in debt and barely scraping by. On top of that, he's being targeted by that bully, the second son of the Li family. Someone like him? Forget about joining the battle armor reserves. He'd be lucky just to crawl out of his current mess." The female student's face flushed with anger. Unwilling to back down, she pulled up Joan's test results and retorted, "Joan may be struggling now, but his potential is undeniable. Just look at his data. His future is far brighter than you give him credit for." Yu Sheng, however, remained dismissive, scoffing, "Stop talking about potential. No matter how much he has, the fact remains, his life right now is a disaster, and that's all that matters." Just as Yu Sheng was tearing Joan down, another voice chimed in from the classroom door. Calm yet sharp, it cut through the tension. "I smell an overwhelming amount of jealousy." The speaker was none other than Yao Lelin, another top student of the academy. Hearing Yao Lelin's voice, Yu Sheng's expression darkened instantly, and the atmosphere grew tense. He clenched his teeth, hastily putting on his headphones, clearly wanting to end the conversation. Yet, just before slipping them on, he couldn't resist asking Yao Lelin, "We've been friends since we were kids. Why do you always defend Joan?" Yao Lelin responded with a faint smile, her words leaving no room for misinterpretation. "Because Joan is the man I've chosen. If he asked, I'd give him anything. A battle armor? That's nothing. If he wanted the entire celestial pivot city, my Yao family's Yao Corporation could make it happen. In the apocalypse, don your armor, defend your home." This was the slogan of the Celestial Pivot City Defense Force, a creed etched not only into the academy, but into the very souls of humanity's warriors. In this fortress city of Tianshu, encircled by 6 towering walls, land and home are everything we vow to defend with our lives. Every inch of this soil is soaked in the blood of those who came before us, a testament to humanity's resilience in the face of the apocalypse. Across this desolate wasteland, humanity's sole objective is to rebuild civilization and rekindle the brilliance of the past, igniting hope for future generations. Look at this city. Isn't it perfect? Our descendants will surely have a bright future. A voice full of hope and conviction echoed through the recruitment video, accompanied by panoramic shots of Tianshu City, painting a vision of a future worth fighting for. Yet beneath the surface of peace, threats continue to lurk in the shadows. Tragedies still occur all too often, serving as stark reminders that the wasteland remains perilous and unforgiving. The next home to fall could very well be yours. That looming sense of danger hangs over every resident like an inescapable shadow. If you want to prevent such tragedies, make the most important decision of your life. Don a battle armor and join the defense force. Defend your home. Become a hero of Tianshu City. Take up arms and annihilate those cursed monsters. The voice in the recruitment video was powerful and inspiring, like a drumbeat urging citizens into action. Every resident of Tianshu City could recite the lines from this video by heart. These words have become ingrained in the city's culture, a rallying cry etched into the collective consciousness of its people. It is this very call to action that has driven generations of young men and women to take up arms. Fueled by their love for their home and their hopes for the future, they donned their battle armors and fought fiercely to protect humanity's last sanctuary. Every day on the bustling streets, he overheard countless passers-by discussing their plans to enlist. Those who failed the selection process for the Battle Academy often turned to joining private security companies, seeking alternative paths to contribute and find their own sense of purpose. On the bus today, Joan overheard someone enthusiastically persuading a friend to join a security company. The man boasted relentlessly, claiming the job offered incredibly high pay, 10 times the market average. However, as someone who knew the dark truth, Joan could only sigh in silence. He knew all too well that such promises were nothing more than bait to recruit naive newcomers for shady security firms. The so-called high pay was only attainable after surviving a brutally dangerous probation period. Those who failed to make it past this phase often ended up as beast fodder, never returning to expose the job's harsh realities. Still, the idea of treasure hunting sounded tempting. If someone stumbled upon a lost battle armor in the ruins, it would be like hitting the jackpot. Thinking about it, Joan decided to wait for the placement test results before planning his next steps. But what troubled him the most was not knowing what criteria this test was based on. After the test, something even stranger happened. The Academy inexplicably drew an entire vial of his blood, providing no explanation. The incident left him confused but powerless to question it further. A week later, the long-awaited day of the placement results arrived. Today would determine the future paths of every student. Based on their scores, students would be assigned to specialties such as communications, strategy, command, or combat, all roles that shape their future careers and glory. However, when Jones saw his placement results, his heart sank. He had been assigned to the logistics division, the one outcome he dreaded the most. The disappointment was overwhelming, making it hard for him to even glance at the results board. Just as he was sulking, Yao Lelin suddenly appeared, brimming with excitement, and eagerly asked about his placement results. Joan, long accustomed to her enthusiastic demeanor, instinctively stepped aside to avoid her overwhelming excitement, which often left him flustered. Yao Lelin, unfazed by his reaction, cheerfully moved closer and exclaimed, "I already found out. You got first place in every subject. I'm already imagining you as my future husband and a member of the Yao family." Her bold statement left Joan utterly speechless. "She's probably already picked out names for our kids," Joan thought helplessly, his face a mixture of frustration and resignation as he tried to figure out how to rein in Yao Lelin's over-the-top enthusiasm. Hoping to snap her out of her daydreams, Joan bluntly shattered her fantasy. I may have gotten first place in every subject, but I've been assigned to the logistics division. His tone carried a mix of bitterness and self-deprecation. Upon hearing this, Yao Lelin exploded with fury. She stormed into the faculty office, kicking the door wide open. Pointing at the teachers, she launched into an angry tirade, accusing them of unfairness and even going as far as to claim, "This placement test is rigged." Seeing things spiraling out of control, Joan quickly intervened, forcibly dragging her out of the office before the situation could escalate further. He whispered urgently, "That's enough. Stop making a scene, it's not going to help, and it'll only make things worse." Inside the office, the two teachers stared at each other in stunned silence, their expressions a mix of disbelief and exasperation. One of them muttered to the other, "Kids these days sure have a lot of energy, huh?" Despite being on the receiving end of her outburst, they seemed more amused than angry. Meanwhile, in the academy's discussion office, several teachers were gathered around a table, discussing the unusual circumstances of this year's placement test. Traditionally, battle armor compatibility tests and contract factor energy measurements were conducted upon graduation. This year, however, the tests had been moved up significantly, and even the academy hadn't received a proper explanation. One teacher frowned deeply and said in a heavy tone, "This change is going to make things much harder. At least before, we didn't have to deal with controversies over talent and lineage. Now, I'm not sure how we're going to handle the backlash. And when will the accessibility of mass-produced battle armors be lowered enough for ordinary people to use them?" Another teacher offered a theory. "I suspect the tests were moved up because of the slow progress in rebuilding outposts. Ever since the last expansion project in the ruins failed, the outposts have been downsizing, but military recruitment has ramped up. Even though the standards haven't been lowered, I wouldn't be surprised if this was tied to the increased demand for manpower." The conversation eventually turned to Joan. A short-haired teacher suggested giving Joan a chance to try using a battle armor. There have been cases in other cities where students failed the compatibility test, but were still able to use a battle armor after graduation. Joan's case might be similar. The long-haired teacher, however, remained skeptical. Shaking his head, he calmly replied, "Unlikely. Such cases are extraordinarily rare, 1 in a million. It's not something we can count on." The short-haired teacher, unwilling to give up, said excitedly, "But what if he's the exception? Isn't it worth a try?" His tone carried a mix of hope and frustration, as though clinging to a last shred of optimism. The long-haired teacher sighed, his voice calm, but tinged with resignation. "And if he is? I've already bent the rules by taking his test sample for a second round of analysis through unofficial channels, and the results were still the same, no compatibility. What else can I do? Everyone's watching us closely now. If we make a big move to assign him a battle armor, neither of us will keep our positions. Honestly, being assigned to the logistics division might be the best thing for him. It's safer than being on the front lines. If you care so much, just look out for him in your own way." While the teachers were deep in discussion, a familiar figure appeared outside the logistics classroom. It was Lin Wei, Deputy Director of Tianshu Technology's Battle Armor Development Department and a representative of the Academy's key investors. Lin Wei was known for her directness. Stepping into the office, she immediately stated her purpose. "I need to reassign some students from the logistics division to help handle a site." The Deputy Director, Yu, cautiously asked, "Is it like before, where you only needed 5 students?" His tone was careful, clearly hesitant about the request. "No," Lin Wei replied with a faint smile, though her words left no room for negotiation. "This time, the site is much larger. I'll need the entire class." And with that, Joan's life as a logistics student was about to take a significant turn. Yu's expression stiffened as he nervously responded. "Although your company has generously donated to the academy, and you hold a senior position, taking an entire class seems excessive, especially since this cohort has only been in training for a few days. It's hardly appropriate." Lin Wei's smile faded, her voice turning icy. "Dear Deputy Director Yu, I fully understand your concerns. However, our collaboration has been mutually beneficial, hasn't it? You've gained quite a bit from it. Or do you think it's still not enough?" Cold sweat formed on Yu's brow as he stammered. "No, of course not. I'm just a bit worried. Some of the students in the logistics class come from influential families, and even the academy treads carefully around them. While you may have nothing to fear as a high-ranking executive, any fallout could make things difficult for me. Lin Wei waved off his concerns with a dismissive gesture. It's just site cleanup, nothing more. Don't worry, those little heirs and heiresses will have special attention. Nothing will go wrong. With that, she strode toward the logistics classroom door, leaving you no choice but to follow along. Lin Wei turned with a knowing smile and said to Deputy Director Yu, "Come on, Director Yu, I trust you won't disappoint me, will you?" Her tone carried a subtle pressure that made it impossible to refuse. Meanwhile, the logistics class was in session. The teacher stood at the podium, addressing the students with a serious tone. Now that you've been assigned to the logistics division, your focus has shifted entirely from the preparatory stage. Your new goal is to earn credits. What you learned during the preparatory phase was merely to ensure your survival within the city walls in this wasteland world. The teacher continued, "In the logistics division, you'll primarily earn credits by completing tasks related to mutant creatures. Remember to familiarize yourselves with their key characteristics, especially their core locations. The Academy will provide practical training opportunities from time to time to help you accumulate credits. Make sure you don't miss them." Shifting his tone, he introduced the unique advantage of the logistics division. One major benefit of this class is the ability to earn flexible credits. These credits can be converted into the graduation credits you need at a specific ratio. And earning them is straightforward. Just turn in the cores of mutant creatures. From now on, the teacher emphasized, everything you need in the Academy, including battle armors, must be exchanged for credits. Each battle armor has a different credit requirement, so your hard-earned credits will directly determine your future equipment. Adopting a more serious demeanor, the teacher warned, "I must remind you that during practical training, accidents and fatalities may occur. This is a risk permitted by the rules. However, if any student intentionally harms others to steal their credits, the Academy will hand them over to the Tianshu Judicial Department, which will decide their fate. So, take care of yourselves and value your lives." Gesturing to a display case nearby, the teacher pointed out the Academy's specialized protective suits. These suits are unique to the Academy and quite expensive. They're designed to save your life in critical moments. But keep this in mind, your first suit is free and only your first suit. In this post-apocalyptic world, every person is a valuable resource. Remember this always, and never take your opportunities lightly, the teacher concluded firmly. Meanwhile, Yao Lelin was completely ignoring the lecture. She was gazing dreamily at Joan, who was seated at the table next to hers. "Joan, we're classmates now," she said with a delighted grin. Joan furrowed his brow at her words, responding with a sigh of exasperation. "How on earth did you end up in the logistics division?" His tone was filled with disbelief and resignation. Yao Lelin beamed, her voice cheerful as she said, "Oh, I just asked my family to pull a few strings to get me reassigned to the logistics division." Her tone was casual, but the underlying pride was unmistakable. As the eldest daughter of the Yao Corporation, the largest private tech enterprise in Celestial Pivot City, her influence was undeniable. The corporation was deeply integrated with the city defense force, covering industries such as weapons manufacturing, pharmaceuticals, and food production. It was also one of the city's primary suppliers of mass-produced battle armors. She continued, seemingly oblivious to Joan's exasperation. "With your grades, you should have gone to the command division, right? But I wanted to stay with you. It's not easy to catch up to you, and I couldn't care less about earning credits. This time, I'm going to keep a close eye on you. You're not disappearing on me again." Her determination was evident, leaving Joan at a loss for words. Faced with Yao Lelin's relentless pursuit, Joan could only sigh deeply and hold his head in his hands, feeling utterly defeated. At that moment, Deputy Director Yu and Lin Wei entered the classroom, interrupting the lesson. Lin Wei spoke directly. "Apologies for the interruption, Mr. Wang. Please have your students prepare for an off-campus practical training session." The announcement caused an uproar among the students. Joan mused to himself, "Practical training? Not a bad opportunity. Maybe I can collect some cores and earn a few credits. Looks like the logistics division offers more chances to earn than I expected. I might not even need to gamble by venturing outside the city walls." Meanwhile, other students reacted differently. "How many credits can we even earn from this? Can I take a leave of absence? This sounds dangerous. Seriously? We just got assigned, and we're already doing training?" Deputy Director Yu, clearly irritated by the students' chatter, slammed his hand on the desk and bellowed, "Quiet! Is this how undisciplined the logistics division is?" His reprimand immediately silenced the room. Lin Wei, however, remained unfazed. She smiled lightly and stepped onto the podium. Allow me to explain the details of this practical training. I'm sure once you hear it, you'll have a completely different perspective. Her tone was calm, yet captivating as she explained. This mission involves collecting mutant creature cores outside the city. Normally, these cores can only be exchanged for flexible credits. But this time, they'll count directly as task credits, and with no deductions. She paused dramatically before delivering the real bombshell. What's more, this time the credit rewards are based on the core's quality. The higher the quality, the greater the multiplier, up to 10 times the credits. The entire room froze for a moment. Both the students and the teachers, including Deputy Director Yu and Mr. Wong, were visibly stunned. The shock on their faces was unmistakable, and the room quickly erupted into excited murmurs. Lin Wei continued with a confident smile. That's not all. This time, there's an additional reward for 2 students, the ones who turn in cores the fastest and in the highest quantities. They'll receive half a month's usage rights to the latest model of mass-produced exoskeletons, with no restrictions on how they use them. Pausing for effect, she added, in other words, no matter what you do with these exoskeletons, as long as they're returned intact, no missing arms or legs. After half a month, everything's fine. Her words immediately sparked excitement among the students. Deputy Director Yu leaned closer, whispering with concern. Lin Wei, isn't this a bit inappropriate? Forget the matter of credits. Just the act of privately deploying exoskeletons is a serious violation of Academy regulations. Lin Wei waved dismissively, her tone calm and reassuring. Relax. When did I ever say the exoskeletons were being provided by the Academy? The confidence in her voice suggested she had thought everything through. Still uneasy, Yu replied cautiously. I hope everything you've said is accurate. If something goes wrong, the consequences could be severe, and I can't afford to take the blame. Raising his voice, Deputy Director Yu announced to the class. You've all heard what Ms. Lin said. This is a rare opportunity. If you're willing to participate in the practical training, head to the logistics office and register with your teacher now. Joan quietly mulled over the announcement. Half a month of exoskeleton usage? That's not a lot of time, but if I use it wisely, it might help ease my debt situation. Still, I wonder which zone this mission will take us to. What if it's too dangerous? If I want to avoid relying on my sister, I need to seize every opportunity to earn money. And most importantly, I hope Yao Lelin doesn't tag along this time. With that thought, Joan glanced over at the table next to him, only to find that Yao Lelin had disappeared at some point. A sense of unease crept into his mind. On the day of the training, the teacher gave a stern warning before departure. Before collecting cores, make sure to assess the safety of your surroundings. Do not leave the designated training area under any circumstances. The Academy will not be responsible for any accidents that occur beyond the boundaries. The teacher continued, always carry your locator device and keep it powered on. If you encounter danger, press the button to activate it immediately. Once activated, head back toward the camp as quickly as possible, and our staff will come to your aid. His tone was serious, emphasizing the risks involved in the mission. Joan glanced at Yao Lelin beside him as she deftly secured her locator, and he asked, exasperated, you don't need money or credits. Why are you so eager to join this? Yao Lelin grinned innocently and replied, I've been stuck under my family's watchful eye all my life, never allowed to leave the city. This time, I finally found a loophole, so of course I'm sneaking out to see the world. Don't worry, I've got my armor and locator already. If danger strikes, I'll definitely run faster than you. You just focus on your own business. I won't slow you down. Her carefree tone left Joan torn between frustration and relief. Meanwhile, Lin Wei stood at a distance with another man, both watching the students as they prepared. The man turned to her and asked, Ms. Lin, I don't understand why you brought these students here. Wouldn't hiring skilled workers be faster and more efficient? Besides, you're even offering 2 exoskeletons as rewards out of your own pocket. Lin Wei's lips curled into a faint, knowing smile. Skilled workers are too loose-lipped, and confidentiality is our top priority for this test. As for these logistics students, most of them are either rich heirs or indifferent to credits, so the ones willing to join practical training are few and far between. And even if something goes wrong, the Academy has a clear compensation mechanism for training-related losses. Remember, the Battle Armor Academy isn't here to raise pampered flowers using corporate funds. She continued, as for rewards, skilled workers demand money and bring endless complications. But students? They collect cores and turn them in, which benefits us in every way. Plus, it offsets the resource losses from testing. Credits are just meaningless numbers to us, nothing to worry about. As for the exoskeletons, lightly used gear in nearly new condition works just fine. Speaking of which, what about the test armor? Has it not returned yet? The man checked his terminal and replied, "The test armor reported mission completion 30 minutes ago. It should have arrived by now." His tone carried a hint of puzzlement, clearly surprised by the delay.